His name is John Nichols, national affairs correspondent for The Nation, host of Next Left, and author of The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, the enduring legacy of Henry Wallace's anti-fascist, anti-racist politics. John, thank you so much for being here.
It's an honor to be with you.
Yes, well, so we're recording this on a Friday the 12th. The defense has rested. They did not take up their full 16 hours in this impeachment trial of whether or not Trump is guilty of inciting a riot and insurrection. And when this airs, it might be that the Senate has voted to acquit, because there are many Republicans who are unconvinced by these arguments that the House managers have made. What's your assessment, just broadly and politically, about what's going to come out of this? How are the Republican senators, going to come down?
Well, I think that an impeachment trial is always a stress test for a country and a stress test for your system. And it tells you, how do you deal with crisis? Mm-hmm. And the answer that this trial seems to be pointing us toward is that the way that we deal with crisis is to go to our partisan corners and not to do what the founders hoped for, which is rise above party, put the good of the country first and all such noble things. And, by all accounts, we seem to be following that pattern. And the questions that we'll look at are the core ones that have been sort of true from the founding of the republic. And that is, to what extent can impeachment actually work? Can you hold a president, the most powerful person in the country, to account? If you can't, what does that tell you about your country? Well, it tells you that elites tend to get away with a lot of things. Powerful people tend to get away with a lot of things. That's not going to be a surprise to many listeners to this program, but it's an interesting confirmation that even now, when you have the ultimate stress, right?
Yeah.
Literally an insurrection, an attempt to overthrow an election, you still can't get to a point where everybody agrees that shouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. Well, we know that. And if indeed that's where we end up, that's useful information going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, it does feel like there's so much riding on this vote, like that it is actually quite important. And it's so hard to remember that it's important, given the fact that we know how Republican senators are most likely going to vote in terms of along their party lines, no matter how insurrectionary that party has become, and the party of Trump. Has there been a moment in history when an impeachment has gone the way of what was morally right and what the crime that was committed, and that that actually senators rose above their party and voted the other way? Has that actually happened?
Nope, never. And so that's the good news about where we're at, right?
Yeah.
No president has ever been convicted.
Yeah.
Throughout the history of the republic, there have been attempts. It's never gone to that conclusion. That's too bad, because ordinary people who get in trouble get convicted all the time. And so what we know is that presidents get a pass. And they get a pass because we're too deferential to this office. That's too bad. But it's also sort of the saving grace in the moment we're in, because impeachment should be understood on two levels. One, you have your project, right? You want to impeach, try, and convict an individual who did something horrible. Mm-hmm. And that's a Richard Nixon. That's for Watergate. That's a Ronald Reagan for Iran-Contra. That's a George W. Bush and Dick Cheney for the Iraq War and crashing the global economy, right? That's what you should impeach people for, and it ought to come to fruition. Just never happens. So do we give up on it? No. You understand impeachment on another level, the separate level from the core project. And that is, what does it tell the people of the country? How do we use it as an educational tool, as a tool that challenges our politics, that challenges it to get better? And in that case, I think the brilliant presentations by Jamie Raskin and the House impeachment managers is really good. It's instructive. It tells us as a country that there is another way, and that we're not going to get our solution out of the Senate. Cool. Then we need to take that into our politics. We need to take that into our elections. We need to identify those who won't hold Donald Trump to account as the same as Donald Trump. Don't ever let them try and get out of that corner. They want to side with him at this point. Great. We've got clarity. Now let's deal with them.
Yeah. I mean, it for sure. I mean, what's been running through my mind this entire time is why would they vote to convict when doing so would implicate them as well as having incited violence, for promoting things like the Stop the Steal rallies, as multiple representatives did, as Senator Ted Cruz did in terms of fanning the flames of election fraud. You wrote a whole book about impeachment, calling it a genius idea. How could we make it better? Does it have to do with reforming the Senate? Does it have to do with reforming the two-party system?
Yes, absolutely. But to get to that, we've got to master the system as it exists now, right? Because unfortunately, the same thing that makes impeachment never come to fruition is the fact that you got to get to 2/3.
Right.
Well, the same thing that you got to, if you want to amend the Constitution of the United States, there are all these barriers to it.
Yeah.
Structural reform, even in the Senate, has all these barriers. And so at the end of the day, we've got to recognize that you take a moment like this and you harness the energy of it and turn it back into your politics, both on the street in a non-electoral form. We have to know that there's some solutions aren't going to come in the US Senate, right? And so we have to have activism in that regard. But then to the extent that we go into electoral politics, what we have to focus on is holding people to account in the ways that they will not hold themselves to account. And that requires us to demand a Democratic Party that is far more militant, that is far more activist, that does seek to punish, and that sees the word bipartisan as a dangerous and destructive term. Now, we were taught that bipartisanship was good, right? We were taught that it was healthy. And when we were taught that? At a time when the Republican Party was in favor of civil rights and the environment. Right. In the 1960s, the Republicans there were a whole bunch of Republicans who were great on civil rights. There were Republicans who were ahead of the curve on the environment. There were Republicans who were leading anti-war figures during the Vietnam War, right? So bipartisanship was possible in that moment. In this moment, it's a fool's mission. And so the smarter move is, if you happen to be engaged with the Democratic Party, if that's your trip, to make the Democratic Party clearer and more focused and more militant as a real counter and as a real tool to change the politics. And I'm not sure the Democrats are there yet.
No, definitely not. I mean, it takes freshman congresspeople like Cori Bush to be the ones introducing legislation to actually kick out, any congresspeople who participated and helped, give comfort, as the 14th Amendment says, to any of the insurrectionists. But I want to, ask you and push back on the idea that once and if, we don't know, this is going to be aired in the future, that these senators vote to acquit, the security agencies have said that will embolden the extremists that mobbed the Capitol that day, that will embolden sort of the most extreme fringes of the Republican Party. So how do we confront that and the ways that the right is going to be, bolstered by this acquittal?
Look, Donald Trump has already shown us his model. If he gets an acquittal, he will use it as a tool to, claim he's vindicated, to strengthen his base. Jamie Raskin's talked a lot about this as the great danger of not convicting. Yes. And so we understand there's a danger there. There's a challenge there. Obviously, you want to monitor it. You want to try and deal with it. You want to make sure that monitoring it and dealing with it doesn't impinge on the civil rights and civil liberties of all of our American people. So there are dangers and threats there that we have to be conscious of. But then there's a final element. Now, I'll suggest this is the most important. The way to counter the extremism of the right is to show that government actually can do good things for working class and poor and disenfranchised people. And so you want to deal with all of these threats, have a democratic governance under Joe Biden and the Democrats who control the House and the Senate actually do a whole bunch of great, big, useful things. Get people $2,000, not one payment, get it $2,000 a month. Get people a $15 wage. Go big on progressive policies, and you'll be surprised at how you grab that center of energy, that center of power, away from the right. It's possible to do, but it's not possible to do by tinkering around things or going down the middle. It can only be done with a militant politics that happens to be on the right side of history, not on the wrong side of history.
I love talking to you, John Nichols. You've got so many wonderful books out. One of them exactly about impeachment, the genius of impeachment, the founder's cure for royalism, and then the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party, as you're saying, and talking about the legacy of Henry Wallace and anti-fascist, anti-racist politics. I hope the party can get back there. And until then, please come back. I love your insights, and thank you so much for joining us in this, of course, once again, historic moment.
I'm honored to be with you, and it's been a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.